Tony, what are the two biggest questions in your mind right now today surrounding PXG?
As simple as possible. It's weird that you can complete an entire sentence in 6 letters, but if you're wondering kind of like what the big question is, it's like PXG WTF.
PXG WTF.
You can also
And
WTF, PXG.
whichever way you like
ways.
it.
Like the logo itself.
All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Tony Covey. I'm Chris Nickel. How you living, everybody? You're Tony Covey. I'm Chris Nickel. We're no putts given. Tony, how you living today?
Doing well. Getting by as usual. I got the yips.
What?
But oh god, yeah.
Can we talk about that later? Because I got some questions.
There is no scenario in which I cannot 3-putt. Maybe a 4-putt.
We're going to talk about PXG. We got some questions. I have a throwback question for you to start, though, Tony. We will get to PXG stuff here in a second, but we released a video Monday, new retro stuff where we take old equipment. This one we took Titleist 975D, and the new Titleist TSR 3. Looking at, hey, what difference does 20 years make? A lot is the point. You can watch the video. We'll post the link in there. But, Tony, 2 questions. Number 1, what is the oldest piece of equipment in your bag to date? and second question, what slot in the bag, like if you were to survey really, really good players, what's the oldest piece of equipment maybe you've seen somebody play or have, and you're like, dang, that's pretty darn incredible. So what's the oldest one in your bag right now today?
I think in my bag it's probably it's a toss-up, but it's all new stuff this year. So it's either the PXG Gen 5 irons or it's Vokey SM9 wedges. So I did have, so as I mentioned, I've been a little yippy and my chipping has kind of sucked of late too. And so yesterday I was playing the back 9 by myself, burned through 9 holes in an hour. And on 16 on my way to making just a horrendously awful double bogey. I left a chip short, like not short, but it was like on the green, but just kind of barely. And so I reached in and pulled out what was at the time the oldest piece of equipment I had in my possession. Just like a Spalding Balata ball. Like I just picked it up like months ago and just every now and then whack it down and hit it. And then I think I was so frustrated with the way I played. I think I left it on the 16th green. I don't think I picked it up. So there you go. That was it. Like a really old Balata ball was in my possession. But
by and large, you don't see. I mean, you see bad players with a lot of old equipment. I get that, but I think it's pretty rare to see good players with old equipment in some regards. I got one guy plays in our Wednesday night league. Up until last year, he switched this year, but up until last year, he was using an old, like, I think it was an SSO3 Sonar Tech 3-wood.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's the answer to your question too. It's going to be like a
3-wood hybrid, 5-wood.
Yeah, because I find not a ton of the better players I play with carry even a 5-wood. Definitely not 7-woods, although I think they're making huge mistakes there because that, as I said, is a cheat code. But they all like their utility irons, their driving irons. And they're like, oh yeah, that's the magic for those guys. But yeah, I think 3-wood, whatever the like one of the fairway woods is very likely going to be the oldest.
I would still play a original Rocket Balls. That thing was ridiculous
for its time. Yeah, I mean that was one of those. Hey, this advanced the category
a lot.
Yeah,
a lot.
Maybe think about it. Maybe one of the last to do so, because I think the era of big gains is over.
Oats.
Thanks, USGA.
Vince Carter. It's over.
I was thinking about this yesterday as I was slamming stuff in my trunk to get the hell off the golf course. But I'm like, what does golf equipment look like in say 30 years? So if you compare what golf equipment looked like 30 years ago to us today, I mean, it's radically different. And if you go 30 years before that, radically different still.
Mm-hmm.
30 years from now, with everything kind of being not only maxed out, but at a time when the USGA is like, you know what? Let's roll this back. Let's
If
take some
anything,
distance out of the ball and the clubs, and let's make them less forgiving. I mean, I don't
mm-hmm.
know that 30 years from now anything looks radically different than it does today.
I mean, remember looking at Moad? Remember the
Yeah,
mother of all drivers?
yeah.
Uh, some of this concept car kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't know how. Yeah, how much of that. I mean, could we do a retro golf in 20 years? And now we're comparing stuff, 20 years apart. Like if we did flash forward, 20 years from now, and we were to do a retro golf, looking, comparing today's Titleist TSR3 to whatever, assuming Titleist is still making drivers
TSR
in 20.
33. What is
Yeah,
it?
like what are we gonna see? I mean, God, that's I don't know. I don't know. But Tony,
New shaft materials, maybe. I don't know.
new shafts.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see. But the real purpose of today, we want to talk a little bit. We got PXG on our hats.
PXG. We decided
Um,
to have a PXG focus show.
PXG-a-thon, because there's layers to this. I always say, it's the
Big
7-layer
stinky
dip.
onion.
Big stinky onion. There are layers to this. We're going to try to peel some of them back. Tony, what are the two biggest questions in your mind right now today surrounding PXG, so we can put some context on this so people can kind of follow our discussion here, because it might wander a little bit. But if we were to put, okay,
If you
here,
really want to, as simple as possible,
I want
it's
I want people
it's
to,
weird. It's weird that you can complete an entire sentence in 6 letters. But if you're wondering kind of like what the big question is, it's like PXG WTF.
okay.
It's, I mean, it's yeah, all over the map, right? So there's new releases and some, I would say I mean, I'm going on probably plus or minus 12 years at mygolfspy, and
Hmm.
relative to market averages, discount pricing, I have never, ever seen anything like what they're doing with what is now the previous 0211 stuff. I mean, that's insane. And
So
so that starts a whole snowball of other questions like, are they going out of business? Is it trash? And it's really sort of
okay,
depending
so
on perspective of PXG and where your mindset is and how you feel about that company to begin with, I think
the two
is
questions we're going to try to answer, or at least facilitate some conversation around. Number one, PXG WTF question mark,
WTF. Yes. You can also
and
WTF, comma PXG. So it
whichever
works
way you
both
like it,
ways. Like the logo itself. Like it's just
whatever you
mirror
want.
image. Yeah.
Secondarily, let's qualify that a little bit from looking at its business model, the history of it a little. We've both been around and following, really studying, if you will, the company literally since its inception, and maybe have a different perspective on that as a result of seeing, like the trailer out at Scottsdale National, what used to be the construction trailer, long before it was this grandiose mecca of golf, that it is today. So before we try to answer the question, what's going on with it today, I think you have to at least give us a 30-second, elevator pitch. What was PXG in, minute one when it hit the ground, its first business model out of the gate?
Super extra ultra uber premium clubs. And some of that is just defined by the materials they were using at the time, or the fact that a bit of what they were doing hadn't been done before, and they were trying to do some crazy stuff with weights, if maybe not in function, certainly in number. And at the time launched with an extreme price tag.
And how extreme was it? So compared to the market, at like a PXG iron cost what, and
Man,
everything else, Mizuno, Titleist, TaylorMade, Cobra,
yeah, I'm going.
Ping,
I,
Callaway, whatever,
I feel like the irons were they 420
350, 400.
they were over 400 each when they launched. Might have even been more than that. And then fairway woods were 5, I think, something, and they're out. The driver was 850,
So
something
call
like
it
that. And it was
the irons were 3x more or less what was on the market. Maybe not
driver
quite.
2x for the most part. Yeah, they were certainly premium priced.
a magnitude that we hadn't seen before. What we had seen at that time a little bit was exotic companies, some companies from Japan that had different things, and we won't get into all the reasons for those prices today because there are different market factors and things in play there that drove that pricing model. But this was a company that, number one, nobody had ever heard of before, right? It was a brand new company to market. There was no heritage, no history. It didn't purchase inventory of a defunct company that went out of business like LA Golf did with Matrix Shafts or something like that. So
And
this
that's,
was
I mean,
literally
to an extent, that's almost, it wasn't defunct, but it's even kind of how Nike started its golf business, was by purchasing a smaller golf company.
correct. So these guys out of for most people out of left field, no history, no heritage, no brand, etc. And then comes in the market and does say, okay, hey, we're gonna, God, it'd be foolish to go into TaylorMade's backyard and try to beat them at TaylorMade's game. These industry behemoths, nope. We're actually going to go twice over that, three times over that. You're charging 100, 125. We're going to do the same thing that Yeti did when Yeti came to market. Do you know the average price of a cooler when Yeti came to market with it is roughly $300? Do you know what the
35.
yeah, it was about 10%. It was about 10%. So they literally came
Coleman.
in
Coleman.
10x. Yeah. So PSG comes in unknown, unproven, all this stuff, whatever, and you can, Tony and I collaborated on a couple articles over the years, PXG effect, looking at a couple things. Again, we can post some of those links below. We kind of go through that history,
It's
but
really an evolution, almost charting the evolution of, sort of,
it's
again,
fascinating.
PXG, WTF.
WTF. So that's where it starts. Makes a lot of noise, obviously divisive, obviously a lot of that on purpose, intentionally done, garners a tremendous amount of attention, a lot good, some bad, again, very divisive. And let's say now we're on Gen 5, right? We're basically into its fifth generation of product, more or less.
It kind
How
of
would
some, yeah, 4.5, right? They kind of skipped 5 or 4 with the Metal Woods. The Protos were the Gen 4, but whatever. Yeah, fifth
yep.
generation of.
So call it generations 2 through 3.5, 4, whatever. How would you describe that era, that kind of middle chunk? Because then we'll get to this last chunk now that we're trying to figure out. What would you call that? Call it Gen 2 through Gen 3.5, maybe 4.
Sort of a leveling off, and then an exploration of different parts of the market. So again, that first generation, even Gen 2, was like, we're going to price this way up here. And then it kind of slowly came down towards the market. And I would say that 2, 3, 4 era is where things kind of leveled off. The $850 driver wasn't going to fly, especially if you're going to look at a mistake that the company made. It was that first driver. Just one of those. I mean, it reminds me of like a Titleist 915, 917, kind of that era, where it's just
Kind of
like, hey,
slow, kind of spinny, kind of
yeah,
average.
slow and spinny, and it worked for the guy it worked for. But if you weren't that guy, and
And
you
there weren't
probably
many.
weren't that guy,
Yeah.
it was going to be short and spinny. And
And you're
so
going to get beat
that's,
by TaylorMade, Callaway, etc.
you name it, you're gonna get beat by everybody. And so that was
Yep.
that was kind of for me, that's the big whiff in the history of PXG, and I think it still haunts them a little bit in terms of perception.
Mm-hmm.
But steadily better, and again, that leveling off, and that's also when we talk of that Gen 3, 4, that's where we started to see kind of this 0211 fork.
Okay.
We're gonna do
So
this other thing.
Okay, so let's again pause for a little context. You had this premium line, right? You said it started way up here. Bob Parsons, founder,
Owner,
CEO, every
CEO,
owner,
chief cook and
CEO,
bottle washer, or whatever you want to call it.
had this, at the very beginning, really wanted people to attach Ferrari as a type of, I guess, parallel entity. Like, hey, Ferrari doesn't go to the Detroit Auto Show. PXG doesn't go to the industry PGA show, right? And things like you don't see that, right? So the idea was, hey, we build it, we make it, then we price it based on what that needs to be. We don't have a price first and then work backward from there. We work up from the bottom. We build it exactly how we want
Zero
to.
constraints.
Zero
Zero
constraints.
constraints.
Figure out the
That's
margin.
the talking point.
Yep. So that series existed as the premium line, and that was 0311, 0341, 0317, and
0811, all the
0811.
all
Yep. And then we get within this last generation and a half, give or take, 0211, which is a departure from this flagship line, all the bells and whistles, right? It is the cream of the crop, it is the top shelf, etc. 0211 is not that, right? So what is 0211?
it's one of the, I guess it's in simple terms, it's PXG's value line. And it's, with that in mind, it's designed to sort of, and there's no segmentation. There's no like PT, XP kind of you don't have the XF driver. It's a one product to rule them all, fit them all kind of thing. So it's, you have designs meant to kind of fit a wide swath of golfers. With the new generation, you're starting to see a cutback on the bells and whistles with the original O211 irons and even the current ones. You see kind of them using what is prior gen PXG technology. Still really good. Some people actually prefer it to the newer stuff. I mean, preference and again, fitting to a degree. So they're using a little bit of their older technology in the irons. They're cast, not forged. And it's things like that. And with the new stuff, which we'll talk about here in more detail, no weights. We're going to take all the movable weights out of a PXG. That's wild. Never thought I'd see that. With the fairway woods and hybrids now, they're using glued hosels. So it's little things that reduce cost, but they're not necessarily sacrificing on the quality of the materials. Yeah, this stuff, they're not using the carbon fiber crowns, but it's a high grade titanium. It's the same stuff as you'd see in most anybody else's premium lineup, in some cases even better. Just a little bit different look. They're still robotically polished. They're maintaining those same tolerances. It's just being offered at a lower price point.
Which we're going to get to here in a second, because pricing is it seems very simple, and it really is, but it can actually be a little more complex than people want to make it out to be.
For
But
sure.
but before we get into that part of it, with 0211, and we talk about, you mentioned things like adjustable weighting schemes, right? From its inception, that's been a hallmark, right, of PXG. Visually,
It's
you had
got
all the rivets.
yeah, the entire soul is
You
weights.
know,
I think that's how I
I
choose to remember it.
maybe too many, right? And not too many in the sense of like, just, oh my gosh, there's way too many of these, but to be beneficial to a fitter or like to the end user, like, okay, how much weight do we actually need to be able to move to impact performance in a way that's demonstrably different than something else? And does that even matter? And can fitters even use it correctly? And I mean, all these things. But the idea of movable weights and irons and in wedges, etc., hallmark of PXG, right? So on the 0211 series, in general, what should consumers expect not to see that they might otherwise see in a PXG flagship? Like, basically, the question is, hey, what am I giving up? If I'm going to pay less for something and I'm getting a quote unquote lesser product, okay, what am I actually giving up?
You're losing some carbon fiber this time around. You don't have the carbon fiber crown.
Okay.
You don't have an adjustable hosel on the fairway woods or hybrids.
Okay.
And you don't have any movable weights anywhere in the line.
Okay.
So let's just, and there it is, right? There's your.
Okay. So of that, and this gets us nicely into this current generation of 0211, of what consequence are each of those things, Tony? So talk through each of those specifically. So let's go just first to the adjustable hosel. We have that in the driver, correct? But not in fairway wood hybrid?
Yes.
Okay. So you can still adjust for loft lie, etc. in the driver as you've been able to before. Not in the fairway wood, not in the hybrid. Of what loss or concern is that?
It's reduced fitting functionality. I think that's a big one, right? Movable weights don't make a driver, a fairway wood, whatever it happens to be, inherently better. No club is inherently better because it has a movable weight in it. It's that ability to dial that weight, move it around, which research has shown time and time and time again that if a golfer goes into a golf shop, buys a club off the rack, movable weights, takes it home, he doesn't touch those weights. Most
Right.
golfers don't know what to do with those weights. They're sort of like this interesting little accessory piece that never gets used. So in a fitting environment, they're beneficial. Off the rack, and I assume a lot of this, and I think this is the intent of the O211 line. I think a lot of this, the expectation is it's going to be bought off the rack or on the website in the case of PXG. And so you could argue that there's, if you expect that that is your typical customer, you don't need the movable weights. And as far as the hosel goes, yes, same type of thing. The off the rack buyer probably, unless he's knowledgeable, but your typical average, whatever you want to call it, off the rack buyer is never ever going to adjust that hosel.
Right.
And then the other piece of that is, from a performance perspective, there is typically some benefit in having that hosel glued over adjustable, just from the weight savings alone. So that hosel is more weight for sure than not having it, just gluing it into the head. And so that
Yeah.
when you have an adjustable hosel, depending on whose it is and how much weight it's there, it does raise the center of gravity, which typically lowers launch, increases spin, maybe pulls the weight to the heel a little bit, which can be beneficial, but you can do that other ways. So it's who is the intended audience? If it is, as I
Yeah.
suspect it is, kind of the off the rack on the web buyer, I guess is now probably the modern version of that guy,
Right.
then it's you're cutting costs to an extent, to no small extent, when you look at these prices, passing those savings onto the consumer and not taking away anything that most golfers buying this product were going to use. And of course, it can be fit, these are going to be in fitting cards.
Right.
So you will have the option to try them. Again, you're just losing primarily the movable weights in terms of functionality, and the rest.
Yeah. Weight is currency when it comes to designing clubs, right? And there's only so much of it. And how you move weight around in a head ultimately impacts performance. And we don't talk about this a ton. We just talk about having an adjustable hosel as like clearly the better option. But you point out something that I want to circle back to that's important, which is those adjustable hosels, right? The tip adapters are heavier in a lot of cases, right? Than just having a glued hosel. So you're taking some of that currency, some of that weight that you need to use in order to create the adapter to put in the hosel to offer that adjustability. And then maybe you have to do something else in that design, like use more carbon in the crown or other places, right? To try and maybe offset that additional weight that now you've pulled towards the hosel and probably slightly higher up in the head as well in order to offset that. So it's not necessarily only good or only bad, but that kind of gets to the carbon fiber piece in the top as well. All titanium
All
versus
titanium.
all titanium versus titanium and carbon. Oh, again, of what concern if I'm that consumer? Should I care that it doesn't have carbon fiber in the top or in the sole, or I can't see a nice cool mesh
You
thing?
should care about whether or not it has carbon fiber in it as much as you should care whether or not your iron has tungsten in it. That's kind of how I look at it. It's
What if it doesn't say tungsten
yeah.
on
Why would you buy an
it?
iron if you don't stamp tungsten and forged and some other proprietary nonsense on the hosel? I don't know why you would buy that club, but
Why even buy it?
yeah, pointless. No, it's one of those things. Like the club is either going to perform for you or it's not, and it's not going to come down to whether or not it has carbon fiber. It's the allocation of weight within the head, the center of gravity, which is all part of the design
Right,
anyway. And again, we obviously haven't MOI tested this. We haven't CG tested it. But
right.
my hunch here is that this is going to be a very middle of the road CG, not
Neutral, neutral,
true.
neutral,
Right.
neutral.
If you're not trying to do anything wild, if you're not trying to push it super low, if you're not trying to go super back, those kind of weight savings, and the other thing here, weight savings with carbon fiber, it's minimal.
Why use carbon, right? It's lighter and stronger than steel, clearly, and titanium, but it's also more expensive. So if you don't need to use it, why would you?
Right. And it's not like the whole industry has moved away from titanium, like it's never used. Titleist
Right.
still titanium. Ping right up until certainly looks like the G, what, 435?
430, 430, 430. I think it's 430.
425. Yeah, I knew we
430.
skipped, so we skipped 420.
We skip
Why was that?
bad
So
move.
right, so they're gonna have carbon, it looks like, for the first time in a long time, but titanium is still, it's not uncommon. It can be less expensive. But again, it's all what you're trying to do with the material. And based on what I think PXG is trying to do here, no reason to kind of chase those mass property benefits. So
Okay.
it's one of those things like, oh, well, they cut back a little bit. Oh, it makes sense given the price point. But at the
Yeah.
same time, for where this sits in the market, I think it makes sense.
0211 now exists as, like you said, kind of the value line, and that's what we're going to talk about moving forward here. Gen 5, current day, 2022, end of 2022. PXG is currently a flagship series that is now entirely under which number, Tony?
0311,
Okay.
which
So we
was
have,
the originally just irons. Now it's 0311, everything.
yep. So 0311 is the overarching umbrella for its flagship line of equipment, which is priced for the most part.
Well, I mean, so I'm looking now, PXG Gen 5 drivers now $399, down from $499. And I don't know. I'd be shocked if there's a new Gen 6 lineup in the spring. I think this is probably going to be a 2-year cycle. I could be wrong. Fairway Woods
Nothing. I'm not going to
29. Yeah.
hazard a guess
And
on.
even if even if PXG says it's a 2-year cycle, in 6 months it could change. 299 on
But when it
hybrids,
came out,
and then
when it
irons.
first came
Yeah,
out,
it's 550, whatever it was.
okay, so metalwood's more or
And
less
now,
in
but I
line
mean,
with.
irons still holding at 350 each, unless you buy 5 or more. And you're seeing a lot of this in the PXG pricing model too, where if you buy 5 irons, which
Who doesn't? Are you going to buy 4? I want the 4, 6, 8, and wedge. I just want the
but that's the thing.
evens.
If you buy 5 Gen 5 irons, then they'll give you bigger discounts on other stuff. So even the one that kind of stuck out to me was the Sugar Daddy 2, which
Mm-hmm.
is typically a $449 product. You
Yep.
buy Sugar Daddies with 5 Gen 5 irons, and they're only $229, which is still 60, 30, $70 more than 60.
Yeah. Yeah.
$60 more than the typical, but
Okay,
discounted.
so for all intents and purposes, then, based on how people normally buy products, and I'm not saying this is across the board all the time, but typically you buy a set of irons, you're buying at least 5 irons. If you're going to buy those irons and you buy the wedges at the same time, point being, if you want to get PXG's absolute best flagship equipment, you're going to pay the same as you would pay with a Titleist, Callaway, TaylorMade, etc. Maybe plus a shade more. Like we're talking 40, $50. This isn't the everybody else is at $100 to $150 for an iron, and now you're 2x, 3x, 4x that. You're basically, it's a luxury tax. There's a
It's
10% luxury tax or
well, that would,
something.
if you look at it functionally, it's a full bag incentive program. So it starts at the hybrid, right? So hybrids are $299 each, but
Okay.
they're $229 if you buy 5 or more irons. And
Yeah.
wedges are cheaper when you
All right.
buy 5 or more irons. It's like, just, we're going to give you a discount and hope you buy more. The more you buy, the more you save.
Hey,
Is
that's
I
weird.
guess
So this leads into our first question, which we're finally circling back to, which is WTF, comma PXG. So what is going on? Because part of where this came up for me, you posted something on, I think it was the 0211 drivers,
the
and I thought it was
the
a
previous
misprint. I was like,
previous generation 0211. So the stuff that would have been, I don't know if we tested, I think we tested it in the most recent Most Wanted, tested really well, I thought,
yeah,
especially for, it was already kind of an inexpensive product offering.
right,
I thought a strong performer. Again, if you're trying to fit that middle of the bell curve, I think they did a really good job there. And now it is on sale.
for how much?
$119. $119 for not
I
just a driver, but what I would argue is a pretty good driver. At $120, it's almost like
I
throwaway
can,
money to try it.
I can't take my 7 daughters and family through McDonald's for $120, right? I mean, I can't list all the things you can't buy for $120. And I look at that, and this is the first time, we started getting a lot of comments, people feeding back, well, are they going out of business? Is this a fire sale? Is it,
That's not the
da.
first time we've heard that. Like, I don't
No.
understand the pricing model, therefore they're going out of business, because that's as much as my mind can work around. That's all
Yeah,
I can handle.
right. Bob's a billionaire because he has no idea how to run businesses. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
So they sold out of the fairway woods, by the way. So the old Gen 2 fairway woods have sold out, but they still have hybrids left for
149.
$89.
$89.
$89 hybrids. And
That's
again, like
ridiculous.
you've heard me since Gen 1 talk about
You
how
love
much
their
I love
hybrids. I love
dude.
their hybrids. Their hybrids are
I for my money, yeah, I'm just a
absolutely.
PXG hybrid fan. I think probably.
So, Tony, what is going
Yeah.
on? What
Clearly, they're
are they
going out
doing?
of business. It's the only explanation, Chris.
It's
The only reason why anybody would sell a golf club for that little money is that they are going out of business. That is
right.
the only explanation. And to buy into that explanation, you have to just look beyond the fact that PXG continues to launch new clubs, which is really weird for a company that's gone out of business, but they do that.
Right. It's odd.
And they are continuing to hire people, which
Also
again,
odd.
odd behavior for a company that's going out of business. But if you
Right.
believe that that is the only explanation for low prices, we got to run with it.
Yep.
They keep opening retail locations, which
I was just at one of those.
TaylorMade tried that and failed.
Yep.
Callaway tried that and closed them all.
Yep.
PXG has not failed yet. I don't know.
Continues
to open stores.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
But some people look at that $119 driver and go, that's it. They're flailing, they're failing, whatever F words you want to use. They're floating.
So why would a company do that? I mean, I get the most basic explanation, right? That
going out of business.
Going out of business. But
I
people
don't
do
think
this all the
that's it.
time. We see liquidations. You go to the store, you shop. You shop on the clearance rack, previous version stuff. Okay,
Every golf company does this.
we're gonna get rid of it. We're gonna lower the price.
Go
until
look at.
Yeah.
I mean, I just got an alert. The Maverick, right now, 2 years old, another price drop on that. So the only difference between what PXG is doing and what everybody else does is how extreme. I think I'm supposed to scream that, right?
Yeah,
Extreme.
There you go.
Discount is. But again, it's standard operating procedure. It's just they just hack away with a bigger knife.
Okay, but this current generation 0211, the new stuff coming out, isn't exactly at a premium price point. So
It not.
So it still begs some of those same questions. Okay, liquidation aside, I think people can hopefully wrap their heads around that a little bit. But now we have brand new 0211.
$149.
Okay, so
subtract. I mean, that's
so now help me out.
You can buy 2 of these, and you're still 100 under a
new TSR.
A new TSR, a stealth, right? You're
gonna be $50 to $100 under everybody else that's coming out with a new driver.
So again, this one's glued, so I don't have much flexibility here. But there's your fairway wood.
Okay, how much?
$239. Same for the hybrid.
All right, so
now you're getting a little closer to industry average. You're still below it.
Well below it, but
well below it.
But let's answer that. So I get the liquidation part of it. That makes sense. So why would a company like PXG, that by all indications, right, premium price point, this is where it started, why would they launch a new line that golfers sit there and go, are they losing money on that? How can you possibly price something that's going to, again, we haven't tested it, so we don't know. I don't know if that driver is going to be really good or really shitty or whatever, but let's assume it's at least as good as the previous version 0211, which was actually pretty damn good and did really well in our testing.
This new one has to be better because, I mean, if you cannot beat $119 driver,
right?
What the hell are we doing here?
So how can they do this? How can they come out with this and say, hey, here you go, we're going to launch this flagship line of value-based equipment? Yes, but when we start to run the numbers and you start to look at it, you go, based on what we know about, at least what we can about pricing and kind of the inner workings, that you're going, this math isn't adding up. So explain it to me, Tony.
It is tricky math. And so at some point you sort of have to trust the math, even if you don't answer it. So I'm gonna take over hosting duties very briefly, and I'm gonna
Okay.
ask you a
Okay.
quick series of
I'm
questions.
ready.
Before Bob Parsons was a billionaire, what was he?
Not a billionaire.
All
He was
right.
a hundredaire.
He was a millionaire.
He was a
He
millionaire.
was.
Yep.
And before he was a millionaire, what was he?
A hundredaire. 100,000aire.
But but what did he do for a living
He did computer stuff.
before that? Before he started programming, what did he
Before
do?
Bob started programming, he was a bricklayer. He laid
No,
bricks.
that you made that up.
I made that up. He did accounting stuff. He did
Bob
actuarial
was
stuff.
an accountant.
Yeah, he did actuarial stuff, right?
Bob knows the numbers. Maybe
Yeah,
not
he's
good with small numbers anymore, but Bob is a numbers guy. And
Mhm.
so fundamentally, I don't believe that he would do this if he didn't see a way in which the numbers work. And again, some of these calculations may be based on a calculated best case scenario type of risk. And Bob is certainly not risk averse.
True.
So I think fundamentally it starts with the math, and then you have to look at other aspects of PXG's business, which are unique. The first, and this is huge in terms of how you can cut costs, they don't they don't play the traditional retail distribution game.
And
So
that's
they're
a
not,
huge deal.
they're not,
That is
yeah.
a massive consideration in all of this, right?
So
I
they're
mean,
not,
like,
I mean, I don't know what the number is. Once upon a time, 30 to 35% was the number that was thrown around in the golf industry. And
mhm.
again, some of that depends on volume and all of that stuff, but we will plus or minus 35%. Bob is not giving 35% of his potential profit to retail. So,
Right.
I mean, you can do the math quickly, but if I start at say 550,
Right. Take away $150, at least. Okay,
so
now you're down to 400.
and then you look at some of it, and again, you're just trimming off little bits here and there, and you're definitely not going to get a number that necessarily works until we get to the second piece of this.
Okay.
When TaylorMade wants to make a TV commercial,
Okay.
Callaway wants to make a TV commercial, Titleist
Mhm.
wants to make a TV commercial. What do?
Mhm. They hire a production company, outsource it, get their tour pros to come in, do that, blah blah blah. I mean,
And what does Bob do?
he goes to another company that he
Calls up
already
Sneaky
owns,
Big, right?
and
Calls there,
says,
and again,
"Hey,
there may be some accounting where one hand
rob Peter to pay Paul,"
yeah,
but
I just move the cash from my right hand to my left hand,
right,
but he owns part of that whole production chain and sort of cranking up the
yeah,
golf marketing
vertical
machine.
integration. So
Right. He's
I
cost savings there that to my knowledge nobody else has. And again, it's not like this huge thing.
but it's
And
bits and
then
pieces.
the last piece of it is, all right, how do we get to these price points?
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe breaking even. I think they were probably barely breaking even on the previous 0211. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
probably, and again, the break even points here a little lower because they've taken out that carbon fiber, they've taken out that
Yeah,
adjustability. So
right.
they shoved that break even point down a little bit. But I think it's also probably a loss leader.
Meaning what? So
I
there's going to
think
be some people that get that, some people that maybe don't totally
they
get
very
how that
well
works.
may lose money or close to it on the 0211 line, breaking
And
even or worse.
why sell a product to lose
2
money?
words: customer acquisition. And
All right.
Bob has talked to us about this before. The idea that and back when everything was premium priced, back
Mm-hmm.
when that Gen 1, Gen 2, and even into Gen 3 before 0211, before we started seeing prices come down, the whole idea is, how do I get you into the PXG family? How do I make you how do I enlist you as a member of the PXG troops?
Part of the troops, yeah.
Right? How do I get you in there? And back in those days, it was a hat.
Mm-hmm.
That was the example he used as like, hey, maybe a guy can't afford a PXG driver, but maybe he'll buy a hat. And we saw some of that. See it, you sort of saw that weird little PXG subculture take off on Instagram back in the day, it was like a handful of years ago, but these weren't even golfers necessarily, but there was just something about the brand that had some appeal.
Yeah,
So
resonated.
they bought hats, and this whole idea of like, how do I get you in the door, has evolved now to golf clubs. And I'll give you a perfect example of how I believe Bob wants this to work with every new entry-level PXG customer there is.
Which is
My
what? How? Yep.
my
So Bob.
cousin Marcus, who may or may not actually be my cousin. There's some, you know, some questionable research on one of those websites where you look up your family
23
members,
and Me or whatever.
whatever it is. Like these genealogy websites. My mother's friends, who's probably equally as crazy as my mother, maybe more so, drew some lines anyway. So I may
Anyway,
or may not
Marcus.
be related to my cousin Marcus,
Okay.
but Marcus needed a new fairway. I think it was a fairway. It would make sense to me. It was a fairway wood because he was playing like an
Let's
R9
go
or
with
an
that.
R7
It
or
doesn't matter.
some
Let's go with
relic
that.
fairway wood.
Okay.
Didn't know what he wanted. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to try this PXG. Why? Because it's cheap, and I'm curious. Low
Fair
prices
enough.
and curiosity, interesting combination." Well, he
Fair
bought it.
enough.
Guess what? He really likes it, and so now he needs a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And guess where he's going? He's going to PXG.
Right.
And next time he needs irons, I think he's probably going to look
At
really
least
hard at
consider
PXG
it,
because
right?
he got a good deal. And maybe he just keeps buying the cheap stuff, or maybe he goes, you know what? I'm maybe curious about this Gen 5 stuff, or Gen 6 maybe at the time.
Right.
And maybe he buys it, maybe he doesn't. But that's all, I think, part of the calculation here
Uh-huh.
is what is the value of a customer? Because, hey, let's say I lose $50 on a driver. I sold a driver below cost. I
Mm-hmm.
lost $50 on this, but I acquired a customer.
Right.
If my formula, and I had no idea what these formulas say, I remember, several years ago as we were growing our email list, at
Right.
that time, the value of an email address was $7. I don't know why I remember that, but that's what it was. At that time, one email address, if I had your email address, it was worth $7 to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how the math works. I don't know how you convert it, but that's what we were told. $7.
At that time, yeah.
So what is the value of a customer? Is it $100? If it is, let's say I have a customer. He's a happy customer. I have his contact info. I'm going to email him. I'm going to send him
Lifetime
all about.
value of that customer is $100.
If it's $100, I made $50 on that driver.
Mm-hmm. Just by acquiring. Again, we're extrapolating this over, tens of thousands and potentially even larger numbers than that, right? So it's not that it's that customer. It's that over, if I acquire 50,000 new customers this year, and some of you are sitting there going, this isn't new.
It's not.
You're right.
But
It's
you don't
not
see it
new.
in golf at this level.
Right.
You don't, because you have to appease shareholders and things like that.
But
it's very difficult.
We've all gone to the grocery store, right? And I actually remember working in a grocery store as bag groceries or whatever. And I remember asking my boss, guy, I still remember his name. His name was Bob Fancook. And good old Bob, that's the real name.
You make up names.
No,
this is
the
not
real
a
name. Real name. And I remember we were selling milk, and it was like 99 cents or $1.29 a gallon or something like that. Ridiculous low price. Anyway, long story short was he said, yeah, I'm losing, 30 cents a gallon, whatever it was on that. But it's in the back of the store. It's here. What that person has to do is two things. Number one, they're going to buy something else just because they're there, right? Secondarily, they're going to walk by all these other end caps and things that we have on sale that are much higher margin. And I know that per person that comes in, they're going to buy X amount. So it's a volume game. I just need to get more people in. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to do a couple things that are super kid friendly so that people are going to want to bring their kids with them, because we know for every additional kid you bring into a store, you spend $5 more on that particular purchase, whatever it is. So you bring in two kids.
That's probably why when my wife brings my daughter and I with her grocery shopping, it's at least $10.
It is. So they know the math works. So bigger picture. But in this context, the suggestion is, right, it doesn't matter if you acquire that customer on Facebook, there's a cost to it. If you acquire that customer by buying an email list or doing whatever it is to get people through the turnstiles into your amusement park, there's a cost to you as a business to get those people in your ecosystem. Now, how you pay for that,
I'm going to sell you a low margin product, or maybe even a no margin product. And then the hope is like, hey, maybe you're going to like this, or as part of your order, you're going to buy a hat. You know what? It's not a lot of money, but a hat, That is a high margin product.
Right.
Like,
Right.
absolutely. And you're going to come into one of my new retail stores and you're going to do a fitting. And maybe you buy everything you got in that fitting. And even if you don't, maybe you buy some of this apparel, a golf bag, again, a hat.
One shirt. Maybe they say, hey, you buy
Get
one
you
piece of
in the
apparel.
door. It's
Yeah.
all about getting golfers through the PXG door.
Hmm. Are we going to see this, Tony, from more golf companies? Do you
No,
think
nope,
that?
nope, nuh-uh.
Why not? So, but hey, okay, let me argue this or ask you this. Every other golf company wants this, right? Everybody wants people to buy into their ecosystem. There's nothing that Cobra Golf wants more than for somebody to also buy Puma gear, right? And they want everybody would love it if they would buy the full bag, right? TaylorMade, they want people all in on everything TaylorMade has, right? Callaway wants you to play Callaway stuff, get an OGO backpack, right? Wear Callaway gear, and then on your way home, stop for some light beer and fajitas at Topgolf, right? All of them want these all-in consumers, people that are bought into the identity of that entire company. So why not?
Yes.
So why not? Why won't we see this from other companies then?
I think the biggest obstacle is that every one of those companies you mentioned are still, say, invested, but I think entangled is probably a better word at this point, with the traditional retail distribution model. So if Bob wakes up one morning, and I almost feel like this is exactly what happened, he's like, you know what? I got this 0211 stuff coming, this new stuff. I don't know what I'm going to sell it for yet. Cause I mean, by the way, I told you 249. That's the latest pricing. This is a day before launch. We're recording this. So if it's 269, it's not my
Tomorrow.
fault. If it's 229, not my fault. But again,
It's
this is
happened
how,
before. It's
yeah. Oh
happened
my God. This
before.
is how. Hey guys, it's Tony. Apologies for the brief interruption, but we do, in fact, as expected, have an update to PXG 0211 pricing. The driver will be just $219 at launch. It has a list price of $299. I don't know if it will ever actually be that price, but that's what is on the website. Fairways $169, list price $249, and hybrids $149 with a list price of $249 as well. All of these come with free shipping and a 60-day 100% money back guarantee. So, the idea again, happy customers. If you don't love it, send it back. With that out of the way, let's get back to no putts given. PXG operates almost on the whimsy of Bob to a degree. And I think there are instances where maybe that has been an obstacle to growth in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
but it also gives them there's plenty of flexibility. So going back to not being entangled in that retail chain, if Bob
Uh-huh.
wakes up and says, you know what, I want to get rid of my old inventory to make room for my new stuff, which is what every golf company does,
Right.
and I'm going to discount it to 119. Or if he says, you know what, today's Wednesday, and I'm going to have a Wednesday sale, Wednesday only sale on my new driver. I'm going to knock $150 off just because I woke up on Wednesday and I'm feeling good. He can do that
Right.
because he's not entangled with retail. Whereas if you want to make that same change, especially if it's a sudden retail adjustment, that's like trying to turn a barge around in the middle of the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
It cannot be done. You got to back that thing out, and and you got to credit everybody and somehow do the make rights. Well, you guys bought it for this amount, but then we discounted it, which erased your margins. And so now I got to figure out how to pay you back. And that's
And by
how
the
the
way, I want to
industry
buy.
got it,
I need you to buy more of my stuff for 2023 here in a
which is
couple
exactly, if
months.
we go way back, how the industry almost imploded. It was that kind of
Right.
stuff, trying to figure out how to make sudden changes and get right with retail and all that stuff. If you don't have those headaches, the flexibility it gives you, nobody else in golf, like at of PXG size, sub
Right.
70 can do it.
Sure they
New
can.
level can do it.
Sure they can.
Dean Snell with his golf balls can do it if he could get them made.
Right.
But like
Right.
that's kind of the flexibility of being this a company that doesn't play in that traditional retail game. You have that flexibility. And like I said, I think
When
it's
you
different.
have
It's crazy, but
when you have a board of one, the executive meetings aren't very long, right? So Bob would always say, "Hey, board our board meetings aren't very long because it's me."
Yeah,
And
I mean,
you know,
like I think Bob listens to his people, but it's not a democracy.
no,
There's no voting.
it's a
You know?
Bobocracy. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, and like you said, at times maybe has that hampered growth in certain things. Probably, very likely it has. But on the other hand, like I said, it affords them an uncommon latitude within the industry to be as nimble as they are, but yet as big and impactful as they are. Like it's such a interesting dichotomy in terms of existing in between, right? A lot of these larger companies that we talk about, but baby, basically eschewing the existing retail model in a way and just showing every single day over and over and over all the shortcomings of that existing model. And my sense is Bob is just laughing all the way to the bank.
I think that's I think you're right, and I think the industry has been very, very slow. And you know, COVID, I think everybody long term will actually benefit this because it has been such an accelerator. But
Yeah.
we all knew like brick and mortar was almost dead. If I'm going to go get fit personally, I'm calling Ian Frazier. I'm like, I'm going to go to Toronto at this point. If I'm not going to TPI or to Scottsdale National and do a
Yeah. I'm
one year
going to
thing,
True Spec or,
yeah,
yeah, I'm
that's true spec club champion. Like that's kind of where you're going for that premier fitting experience.
right.
Everything else off the rack can be done online.
Yeah.
And if I'm Callaway, I'm making a hell of a lot of that more money if you buy that club from
Yes.
me than if you buy it from Dick's Sporting Goods
Right.
or
Which is
from
a
PGA
hard position
Superstore.
for them to be in, right? Because
Right.
you can't, at one
I'm
point, they
giving
say,
you a
hey,
lot of money, and arguably there's no reason to anymore.
no, no, there's at least, we said plus or minus 35% that I'm literally just lighting on fire. So I guess maybe that's the other question. Do you think we'll see more and more of these large companies weigh that, do the calculus, right? Do the math and say, we're going to quietly start to put more and more emphasis into DTC, getting people to our website. We understand that this is going to piss off the retail channels and it isn't good ultimately for our retail partners. However,
Well, and you are seeing retail evolve too. So I think, I mentioned Dick's, and not to pick on them, but they have worked to improve their fitting. Superstore, to their credit, I've heard from a couple different industry sources, they don't want you to walk out of the store with a golf club you weren't fit for.
mhm,
That's how they want to sell a club. Doesn't
mhm.
mean it happens that way, but we still know most. I think it's still the majority.
Yeah, it doesn't
Maybe they
happen
go in and
overnight. Yeah,
yeah, and it's nice to, I guess, have a spot where you can go bang balls and get a feel for them.
sure.
But a lot of people, they know what they want before they hit it.
Right.
When TaylorMade Stealth came out, I mean, how many golfers made that decision before they could actually buy it? That pre-orders. Like they killed it with that club as an example on pre-orders.
Right.
Sight unseen or just virtually
That had
seen,
nothing to do
never
with
hit.
fitting. Yeah,
Right.
clearly.
So, and I
Yeah.
think if you understand that that's a lot of my business, why am I giving that money to somebody else?
Why?
When again, I can work that into calculation. Now I could, and this is the PXG difference that, well, I could sell my clubs for less because I'm
Right.
not giving that money away. And I'm doing some other things that saves me money relative to my competitors. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
pass some, a lot. And in some cases, you're not making money at 119. You're losing money.
You
So
have
your
to be,
eating
right?
costs, I'm giving some of that back to the golfer, which is crazy when you think about, we talked about where PXG started, 850 driver for a driver, $500 irons, whatever,
Right.
that was insane. Now they're kind of becoming the brand that I'm going to give these savings back to the golfer.
Mhm.
And eventually golfers are going to catch on when they're seeing, what, I can get a brand new PXG driver, and I don't know what the next gen driver is sell for. I think it'd probably be close to market average, but
Yeah.
0211's at 250. These guys selling at 600.
What?
What are they
Yeah.
doing? How much extra money, if you will, above and beyond? And I think everybody, it only costs X to make a driver. Well, if it costs X to make a driver, you can't really sell it for that
Right.
unless you got your own math going on over here. But because you got to pay the guys that developed it,
Sure.
and you got to pay all of the ancillary support staff, right?
Sure you do.
Some of the cost of a driver goes to the HR department and the finance guys, right? You have to pay all of those
Marketing,
people, right? All of
marketing,
those,
advertising.
but yeah, everybody knows about marketing, but you don't think about the other stuff too. Like you have to have an HR department, you have to have a finance department, you have to have billing people and warehouse people. Everybody has to get paid. So you can't sell a driver for exactly what it costs to produce it.
Right,
Um,
right.
but in some cases, like I said, you can pick products, and I think this is what PXG's done. Like, I'm going to eat this. I'm going to eat the profits on this. I'm maybe even going to lose money on
Yeah,
this. I'm going to make a lot of profit elsewhere in my lineup because
yeah.
I'm still making money on Gen 5,
I need
and
more people in the door. I
I
need
mean,
more people in the stadium.
I'm selling shorts for what 120 at least. I thought maybe even
Yeah,
160, and
yeah.
you don't have to sell many of those to make up that driver difference.
Mm-mm.
So I mean,
Just
there are other ways to make money, but it's wild, man. It's a wild ride at PXG. Sometimes I'm like,
get me in the door. Like you
yeah,
said, think about it. And for as much as we talk about equipment and stuff, it's not about the equipment, right? The big picture. It's about getting people into the ecosystem, get them on the team, and let it go right
I mean,
from
you
there.
must know guys. I know guys where, hey, this guy had a full bag of Callaway clubs,
Yeah,
and then 1, 2, 3 years down the road, he had a
yeah.
full bag of old Callaway clubs, and
Mm-hmm.
then the next year he had a full bag of new
You
Callaway clubs
absolutely
because he bought Callaway. I don't know what he paid for it, but he liked it, right? He felt
Mm-hmm.
good about it. He
Yeah, yeah.
felt some sort of connection with the brand, and he
Yes.
became a Callaway guy. And there are
Yep.
TaylorMade guys, and there are Titleist guys, and so
Mm-hmm.
you know, PXG is trying to develop an entire platoon of PXG guys, albeit in a way that's a little bit different than how the rest of the industry operates. But yeah, if you look at that
Yeah.
119 price tag and go, they're going out of business, they're having trouble selling stuff. Yeah, yeah.
You're missing the point.
I mean, at some point, right? I mean, I go back to when PXG launched. They're not going to last a year. They're going to be out
Yeah.
of business in 2 years. They're not going to last 5 years. Well, now we're rolling in, I think, year 8. Like, all right, guys, you don't like the 119? You think it's a sign that this brand is imploding?
Yep.
You tell us in the comments if you're one of those that believes PXG is imploding, give me the drop dead date.
Yeah.
What is the second number on that tombstone? We know when it was born. We can look that up. When does
Right.
it die? If
Right.
you're
And
so
there's
convinced that
zero,
yeah,
literally zero key staffers from that first group of, well, I mean, I guess keep Zach Johnson on there, but
the tour staff.
the
And
tour
it's the
staff
other thing too, right?
totally flipped
PXG,
over.
and this is one of those interesting ripples where like, well, who plays it? I'm like, well, they still have some guys, and they have a lot of LPGA pros, but
Mm-hmm.
but Bob did a calculation. He did math because that's what accountants do,
Right.
and he looked at what happened. People like to pretend PXG equipment has never won on tour. It has. It's won on the PGA. It's won on the LPGA
Yeah.
tour.
It's one
And he looked
everywhere.
at
Yeah.
what happened. What was the trend in my sales when I won on PGA Tour? And guess what? Not good.
Nothing. Nothing.
And that's pretty much true. Occasionally something will happen with a weird one-off putter.
Right.
But if you're looking for one-off success related to one PGA Tour guy winning one tournament, it
Right.
doesn't happen. It does not
Nope.
happen. And so you sort of just need a few guys to maintain credibility. And depending on your mindset, you may say, hey, well, I don't like who plays PXG or they don't win enough or whatever the argument is. You can say, all right,
Okay.
well, that's fine. I can't dispute that. That's a very personal interpretation of the value of a tour pro.
Right.
But in terms of the actual monetary impact of a win,
Yeah. Yeah.
and other small calculations too, like, hey, you know what? The side of a guy's hat, I feel like that's no worse than the front of the hat.
Right.
A little bit non-traditional way of looking at sort of the value of TV time and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, all of these are calculations. Little bit of gambling and
There's always
conditional
risk.
statements.
Yeah.
There's some probabilities thrown in there into the math, but that is the math. Like, hey, if this is worth this X, Y, and Z, and
Yeah.
probably multiplied by pi somewhere in there because you always got to do that. But yeah,
I would love to hear too in the comments. Listen, like if you are somebody that is a brand type person, right? Where you're bag matches the the type of clubs that you play, or you have been fit for one and the other, you're like, nope, you like that. You like the idea of, I play Callaway stuff, I play Titleist stuff, I play TaylorMade stuff, etc. Why is that? What's attractive to you about that brand? Like, what is it about that company that really resonates with you? Because they said all companies are trying to do that and achieve it, and there's nothing any of those companies would like more than for the person who plays one wedge to ultimately get the other 13 clubs in their bag as well. That's what they want. So if you are that person that's out there that's doing it, what is it about that company you go, man, Ping, I'm all in. If it's
I'm
Ping,
Ping guy.
I'm in. I'm a Ping guy. Love it. Started with the Ping hoofer, and I haven't turned back because I love the bag. And then I got, like, what was it about that kind of drew you in there? Because it's interesting. It is interesting, Tony. Final thoughts? Do you have a final thought?
Customer acquisition. That's it. Those are the 2 words.
That's what it's about in this day and age.
PXG, WTF, customer acquisition.
Get in the stadium. We'll make it up on hot dogs and foam fingers
and light
everything.
Beer. Lots of light beer.
Lots of light beer, Tony.
The occasional plate of fajitas.
Let's get it. Tony Covey at GolfSpy, Chris Nickel at GolfSpy. Find us on the interwebs. Comment, like, and subscribe. All those things, please. If you got questions,
tell us what you think.
Stuff.
Do you love PXG? Do you hate PXG?
Love
Are you here for the long term? Belly up. What's the drop dead date? I want to know.
Yep. If they're going down, when are they dying? You let us know. Until next time, we out.